pre-engagement to go through the documents for the consultation document and some of the other information that's going to be used during our consultation period as well, once audit sign that off. So first of all, just to ask, are there any apologies? We do have one for Councillor Halamaley. Move, accept that, Councillor Holding, and second Councillor Roby. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, that's carried. Do we have any declarations of interest? None, that's fine. So moving straight to the one report that we've got, 3.1 on page 6. Long-term plan 2021 to 31 pre-engagement. And I hand over to Mr. Hope to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just make a couple of very brief comments and then pass over to Mr. Searle to expand on those comments. At our original timetable, we were hoping to be adopting a consultation document at this meeting. However, circumstances have intervened. Primarily, the challenge we faced getting a consultation document and supporting information through the audit process. Our understanding is that it is being reviewed by the Office of the Auditor General's hot review team today, and we will get feedback from that process from the assigned director over the next couple of days, and look to incorporate that feedback into a final document. Hopefully be ready for approval and adoption within the opinion on the 19th of April. So yeah, so discussed it with the mayor and decided there was a need to actually start the engagement, so we can start engaging without having a consultation document, but we still need the month-long period for consultation, which will run from late April to late May, and then we'll have the hearings and everything else in a bit of a compressed time frame that will finalise once the audit is received. I did circulate material, the notice from the Auditor General this morning about their increased scrutiny and emphasis on consultation documents and contents of them, and their, I think it's almost an instruction to their audit providers that they have far more matters of emphasis in their audit opinions, and so to highlight potential readers important matters contained in the consultation document. This one particularly relates to the 3 waters that is being discussed and proposed at the moment. So other than that, over to Mr. Searle.
So I think Paul's really covered off all the logistics that we're facing over the next several weeks, and I have got in my report a list of what the next steps are. Some of those dates are still yet to be confirmed with the governance advisor, which will do that post this meeting. But as Mr. Hope says, we're still on track to meet our original timeframe of adoption at the end of June. We will have to reschedule our hearings dates and deliberations dates, so that's something that officers will work on the next couple of days. As Mr. Hope said, today's meeting is just about adopting or approving the content of the CD, not the actual CD itself, because Mr. Hope advised we do need that audit opinion before we can adopt the consultation document on, hopefully, the date of 19th of April. What we've also got in today, in the report, is some underlying or what we call supporting information for the consultation document. So several of the documents that we will be putting in front of you are as a result of legislative requirements in the Local Government Act, including things like the draft infrastructure strategy, financial strategy, and some forecasting assumptions. What I've included in the report is just a rundown on what the legislation requires of each of those documents for your information. So apart from that, Mr. Chair, we can probably start to go through the documents if that's the way you want to.
Yeah, this is quite a bit of information, so I think if we just work through page by page, but try and be brief, and we'll see how well we can get through it in a lot of time.
Just another comment on the draft consultation document. Of course, we're currently, the draft CD is currently with the Officer of the Auditor General. So from this point onwards, any changes really need to be limited to grammar and typos. Otherwise, we're facing going through more audit and a potential delay in our current time frame.
Right. Okay. So we go to the start of the consultation document on page 10. And we'll go from there. So let's take 5 pages at a time if we can. So anything on those first 5 pages?
Well, yes, Mr. Chair, I will flag in the meeting that I think it is a shame that auditors having such a extensive influence. I did question earlier the use of the word proposed minor changes to other documents, because I think minor is a word that exists in the eye of the beholder or the receiver. And the people who see those changes may not consider them to be minor. They may consider them to be very significant, particularly if they affect them adversely. But I've been advised, or we were advised, that audit wouldn't even let us change that. So I simply register in that sense a intense frustration that these people who are not consulting with anyone are actually unduly influencing how we consult with our community. And that page and that small word is one example of that.
I think, yeah, there is a very conservative approach that audit take, and just commenting very briefly on that to get it out of the way. You know, they have a legislative role that they have to play. I think they go beyond what they need, what they say they can do, to actually require us to do extra things. And in some cases, I don't think it actually helps with the consultation. On the other hand, their role is there to make sure that whatever comments that we're making, whatever forecasts we're doing are based on good information. Unfortunately, it is their opinion of what good information is. And that can cause some issues when a lot of it has to be based on assumptions. It's what we think are reasonable assumptions. They may not agree with, and they get to rule the roost on that one. Having said that, it's the system we've got. They are there to safeguard the community, and even if we think they're not quite doing that job well in some cases, it is the role that they have. So that's probably all we can really say at the moment. It's probably more than enough. Mr. Hope's nodding, and time to move on to the document. So anything else on those first 5 pages? Oh, Mr. Sewell?
Just page 3, of course, the date changes at the bottom right hand corner of that page. Yes, we'll change the date, so that will be one.
Okay, so we'll just use the agenda page numbers from now. So page 16 through to 20.
Well, again, Mr. Chair, I have made suggestions, grammatical only, relating to the first questions, changing them from could be doing to could do. I don't think that changes meaning. I think it just simplifies the questions a little.
Page 21 to 25.
I think, yes, Mr. Chair, sorry, with your permission, I've raised, this is the first time this document's been seen in a council meeting rather than a workshop. And I'm just looking for 26, page 25, I think. With regard to the options regarding rates, I'm still uncomfortable that we identify option 1 as our preference, especially since we haven't voted on the matter. And I mean, it's not my preference, option 1. And other councillors may or may not prefer rate smoothing. But I would just like to see the options presented as options rather than signalling in one instance what our preference is when it's not been voted on in a meeting.
Councillor Taylor.
Well, to be fair, none of this document until right now has been voted on in a meeting, so everything has been general direction that we've given staff. And the other thing with that is the no smoothing option is the way it falls out. So it's status quo. It's as it's actually hit us, and anything else is a change in that. So usually, if we're not putting a direction, status quo tends to be the direction. So I'm supportive of us leaving that in there because my strong belief is this is the way it sits, and this is the way where the costings fall and the dates they fall. And the smoothing option is actually changing and messing with that, and it's actually setting up a council in the future with more of a burden than we need to have. And so we need to be mindful if we want to make that change, and the community needs to be aware of what that means. So status quo for me is what the preferred option should be, because it's what is actually, you know, it's the one that actually happened in reality before we start messing with it anymore.
Mr. Power.
Just on page 23, there's reference to 70% public particulated wastewater system there. I just asked staff just double check on that number. Ministry for the Environment in its recent national assessment, I think, had Waitaki showing as 34% unreticulated. So that figure may read 66 rather than 70, but if we could just check.
Just a couple of questions. Well, one question really, which is also just on the fact checking. We show 31 cents in every $10 is spent on economic development, and it didn't sounded higher than I would have expected it to be. Can you tell us what is included in that economic development function?
Oh, yeah, it would include a number of grants and including the funding to tourism.
Oh, okay, right, so
It's broader than just straight economic development grants or the function itself.
we have the council economic development function, the funding we give to tourism for promoting tourism, which is obviously economic development, and some grants.
Yes, potentially even the grant to Waitaki resource recovery might be included in that activity. I just need to
Explains that. Thank you. Mr. Silk.
So page 25, still that rates affordability table. Audit New Zealand have suggested or required us to put in 2 extra years, 24, 25 and 25, 26, just to show what happens after the first 3 years.
Are they suggesting we smooth it for longer?
No,
They're trying to dictate how long we smooth it.
No, they're not suggesting that. They want us to. They said for clarity to the reader to show what happens after the smoothing exercise.
I think it's important to point out that, as everyone in the real world knows, in the long-term plan for 10 years, we review it every 3 years, and it's the first 3 years always end up being the most pertinent and most important. And by the time you get to year 4, things have often changed quite considerably, so that those things forecast to happen in that year may have already happened, may not, may happen later, or may not happen at all, because decisions may be made that are different to what's in there. So interesting that they've required that. I can understand from their perspective, but equally it doesn't really real good my mind, but that's the way it is. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Chair, my view is we go a bit further than that. I heard Mr. Searle correctly. He said they have suggested. My view is we should thank them for the suggestion and advise them we don't intend to accept it. Because our long-term plans are redrawn, reproduced every 3 years, and that's the time frame that we've worked on, and that's the reason we've only done 3 years, and we're not going to change.
Is there wording in framed as a suggestion?
with this suggestion, I didn't think that it made a material difference to what we were trying to get across to the reader, and chose the path of least resistance with Water New Zealand and said, yes, we will walk to the table.
So you've told them that already?
Yes.
Councillors, do you have any view on that? Do we roll with that punch, or do we fight back? Councillor Tabitha.
Well, that's what we're projecting at the moment, and I think if it can go with a rider, that there will be a new long-term plan within those timeframes. So outside of the 3-year cycle, it's subject to change. I don't know if we can put that rider in there or not. So,
Well, I think at the bottom of page 26 is the one. We do have that asterisk.
25.
Under all of these options, only rates us for year 1, subsequent years subject to change by the end of the process.
that's still our projections at this stage. I don't have any drama with it.
I think if that note can be made larger and that is added to that another LTP will be there before year 4, something to that.
Yeah.
Just to try and to convey a more complete picture of the real situation. Okay, pages 26 through to 30.
Oh, sorry, Matthew, it's just 20, 25. I did suggest a capital O for the question option we're in each case.
26 to 30. 31 to 35.
Sorry, just a question, please. 35 is not part of the consultation document, is it? It's just 34, I should say. That's the draft long-term community engagement plan. That's right. So that the consultation document ends on our agenda, page 33.
So we'll just do those 3. That's fine. Yeah. I think. Okay. So move on to the engagement plan. So you want to speak to this?
The engagement plan has been altered from the last time you saw it, just to incorporate the new dates. We've added the public launch on the 10th of April and adjusted the formal consultation period to the 21 April to the 21 May.
So just if I can add to that, this morning we had a comms portfolio meeting with Councillor Tavendale, Councillor Hopkins and myself, where we've suggested we utilise in the pre-engagement period to have some live streams looking at a range of topics, each one focusing essentially on a different topic. So having 1 or 2 focusing on 3 waters, having 1 focusing on roading, 1 on waste management and so forth. So that's a suggestion at this stage, but I think it's a very good way to help give people an understanding of the changing world that we are in at the moment, with a lot of infrastructure spending forecast for the next 10 years, which is driving a lot of the extra costs in rates. And so to be able to go through those and explain them, the idea with the live stream, it's obviously it's limited to those who can access that, but that is a large proportion of the community. And it's a way to discuss in detail some of those topics which you can't easily convey in written material, which would be quite expensive to actually distribute properly around the community. But it will help explain, at least, as I say, the reasons behind rate increases that we're facing. So just ask whether people have any thoughts on that. You're in favour, generally?
Yeah, I think personally, one of the ones I thought you mentioned this morning, which made perhaps a little bit more sense, was the Sports and Vet Centre. Have a live stream on that. I'd still like to work out what we're going to do in a live stream about waste management, given that what we're saying about it in the consultation document. So, I mean, but I think the idea is excellent. Maybe the individual issues could be nested.
Well, on waste management, we charge 31 cents and $10 for rates for solid waste, and we do actually do quite a bit in it. And so explaining what we actually do, but also explaining why are we not proposing 2-bin, 3-bin, or even 4-bin. Curbside service is an important part of the discussion. We're asking the question in the and I think, you know, the more that people understand why we've come to that position
Yes.
at the moment, the better. So it is about being able to tell them what we are doing as much as what we're not doing.
Exactly.
And again, help, you know, people make calls on what they want to make submissions on. So is everyone open to that? Just a hope.
Sorry, just realised this is a fresh idea. Did you have any discussion about timing, whether it's a daytime issue or perhaps evening to make it more available? Is it a question and answer type session that you're thinking about, that people can pose questions over?
Yes, yes, and yes. I think they work well as sort of midday and evening opportunities, and so being able to do either or both is, you know, works. They need to be short enough that people can watch them reasonably easily, because they'll be available to people later on, and so people don't have to watch them live. But if they're watching them live, they need to be long enough that there's opportunities for people to message in questions that they might have, so they can be answered live. And yeah, just create more transparency and openness around what we're doing and the reasons behind so much of what we've got planned for the next 2 years.
Are you expecting the relevant staff resource to be at those as well?
Yes, it would be good to have a staff member, a relevant staff member at each one. So it's yeah, without committing to what times things would be, it's making sure that it works for everyone concerned. So yeah, that would be good. So that would be an added aspect to the engagement, which I think will hopefully help encourage more submissions. We don't want to get to the situation where I think Wellington got to, New Plymouth got to, where they didn't have enough submissions, and the mayor felt that everyone was happy with the 12% increase. So it's fair to say they got a lot more submissions after that. You said that.
That's another one that you mentioned this morning about rates, which would be another worthwhile live stream, the whole issue of rates changes, affordability. I mean, it may well be even that it's explaining 3 options that we're putting to people.
Okay, right, moving on from that. Then the other engagement, obviously we've got to have a schedule made up of places and times to be engaging directly with communities around the district, and it's expected that councillors will be as available as possible to attend those along the way, particularly if they're in their wards. That schedule has to be confirmed in the near future. Would you fair to say, Mr. Searle?
That is a fair point, yes.
Okay. Good. Right. So if we go on to, is there anything else up to page 40?
Page
29?
Those tables, I mean, it's a really clunky page anyway, which I understand it needs to be, but it's really clunky when you look at the bottom table for commercial property. You've used commas in the above two to try and make it a bit clearer, numbers wise, and I just think you should add some commas if you can squeeze them in for the commercial properties, just to make the numbers a wee bit clearer to read. And also how you've defined CV, you've given you've said what the CV is, but you haven't actually said what CV stands. So it'd just be good to throw that in just for extra, just to help people understand the tables a bit more. Does that make sense?
That's good.
And I think we should, that would also make it a lot easier if we dropped off the sense. Drop off the sense of.
Yeah.
Agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd round them up or down, would you? Is that what you're saying, Paul?
Yeah, these were a recent development because the first version of the table, we did agree with audit's feedback that they were unintelligible because of the number of examples, the way we formatted it. So this was a new format to try and get past that. But no, appreciate the comments. Yes, we don't even say it's capital.
Mr. Sewell.
So since this version that's in front of you, there's been a further version in consultation with audit. Our accounting manager was under the understanding that we needed to put in 10 years rates for the LTP. That's not the case. So what we've done now is we've got, say, 4 examples, Wamaru as an example. So we've got a capital value of 250, one of 320, one of 570, one of 760. So that to get a better range. So that'll be in the next iteration of the one you see.
And you're not doing the whole 10 years, did you say?
No, I'm not doing the whole 10 years. No,
So when would
that
it
is
finish?
just rates charged for 2021 and rates projected for 2022 and percentage change. So we've simplified it a lot.
Which would mean the numbers could be bigger to some extent.
And to follow up on Mr. Hope's comment, the cents have now been dropped out of the latest version.
So audit agree with no sense.
That was one of the first comments we agreed on.
Okay, anything else up to page 40?
Yes, Mr. Chair, on page 40, I've raised this before, but under the overview, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs down, although not a perfect measure, typical household rates are a useful general indicator. Waitati was placed 38th of the 64 councils included in the 2019 Taxpayers Union of Residents Union Survey of Residential Rates. I still don't think it makes good. What are they saying? Is 38 a good place to be or a bad place? Is that most expensive, least expensive? I still believe there needs to be some clarification or further explanation.
So with one being the highest or lowest, I think
Yes,
we
exactly.
just add those few words.
Yeah. It's just something like that in the future years.
Okay, moving to page 40, pages 41 to 45. Pages 46 to 50.
Yes, Mr. Chair, under the rates of income affordability, page 46, sorry, Gary, third paragraph down, council tracks, Oamaru residential rates, etc. Second sentence, affordability for large commercial and residential ratepayers will be considered. Well, it can't be residential, it must be rural. It's been raised before, but it hasn't been changed.
No.
It can't be residential, can it?
No, it says for, right, we just
Okay.
did previously.
So just to clarify, it should be affordability for large, we're saying rural.
No, commercial.
Large commercial and
Commercial and rural rate.
Rather than large commercial.
there are a few typos, but we can,
Councillor McRogan.
Page 48, year 2025, I see the rates projected increase there goes back up to 8.22. And for the life of me, I'm trying to understand why that is. I thought they were. Okay, well, that's the answer. Is that the answer? Sports complex?
Yes.
Right, thank you. Of course, thank you very much.
It's probably about 3% of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. That's bearing in mind it's only in this based on the assumption at the moment business case is still being done.
Yep.
facility. Okay, anything else through 50?
Just question on page 43, if I can, Gary. The graph on page 43 showing the borrowings projected trends. It shows that the top green line is the borrowing. It shows a very big rise in years of 2025 long-term plan. Rec Centre comes in earlier than that. Is there any need to actually advise why that borrowing reaches up to 55 million? Is it, or read on that?
What feedback we're given on this was to have some vertical, dashed lines or something showing what year that those comments were referring to. The other, just while you raised that one, better to use one term, I think, so rather than using recreation centre, use sports and event centre. We don't have mixed language going through.
And the sentence should read above chart illustrates, not illustrated.
So, but I believe a chunk of the difference from going from 2024 to 2025 is the sports and event centre in that time frame.
Yeah, it's combination of the sports centre and a couple of major infrastructure projects.
Yeah,
I'm not sure we taking another budget. It's just a straight spend. Some of them infrastructure spend.
So it's certainly focused more than the event centre. Yeah.
24, 25, 26 has some significant infrastructure projects in it.
Right. So it's a major water projects happening through that couple of years. Thank you.
And I agree with you, that'd be good, but having a bar, some of them, the explanation of why it's so high in that period would be very helpful for the public.
Okay, right, moving on. 51 to 55, that's all it is.
Page 51, it's a little bit, just clarify, is the $2.5 million self-funding disaster contingency fund? I thought that was 10 million. I could be confused here. Is it 2.5?
2.5. The original target was a $10 million fund. That was set in the early 90s. So it's been varied by a number of subsequent council decisions.
Cool. And the table at the bottom, the network infrastructure groups, it's an interesting table, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of activity going on with the figures. Yeah, they're all zero. So I'm not sure of the purpose of the table.
It's a mandatory disclosure. So
Yeah.
it's it's how the growth, the amount of spending that is directly related to growth.
And if you were making submissions on our development contributions policy, you'd say, if you've got no capital identified to provide for growth, why are you charging DCs?
It's capital exclusively for growth.
Yes.
Where all of ours is mixed.
That's right.
Page 51.
Yes.
What does LAPP stand for?
Local Authority Protection Program.
I just wondered if anyone else knew that. Thank you, Paul, very much. No, just conferring here. Thank you. Local area.
Local Authority Protection Program.
Thank you.
It's an insurance, local authorities insurance program. It's basically councils and members of. Christchurch had a pretty good go at cleaning it out, I think, during the earthquakes, but it's grown back up a bit. Yes, you can see.
So it's a mutual fund approach to
Horizontal infrastructure.
Very good.
Yeah.
Did you say horizontal, vertical, Mr. Chair?
Horizontal infrastructure,
Chair.
pipes and roads.
most of the vertical we can cover through normal insurance policy, but the horizontals very covered.
Do you need definition for vertical?
I think I think LAPP should perhaps just have brackets explaining what it is.
Yes,
Thank you.
good point.
Got there at the end.
Page 56 through to 60, just a question on 56 for me. The asset name Open Taylor Depot and Herbert Forest Implement Shed, why we bundle those together?
Confusion over geography.
Or is
Put a comma between them rather than and, because it makes it sound like it's one place.
we're keeping
That should be.
some of Herbert's stuff? Anyway, yeah, it just seemed to be a bit odd, because it seemed to have individual items listed elsewhere. Councillor McRobbie.
Just asking under loans to other entities on page 52, should there not be a loan there to the Waitaki District Health Services? 700,000.
We could include, I mean, it's not a loan similar to the others. I mean, it really is a short-term funding facility, but if you would like it included for transparency, I'd happy to do that.
Just on that same page, the Kura Duntree irrigation, is that 3.7 million correct? My memory tells me it was 3 million plus.
And that was the total. Plus credit interest, so it's the total approved.
Okay.
It was
So-
3 point, I think 3.5.
Thank you.
Councillor Hopkins.
No.
I think it was up to 60. Anything else up to there? We're getting into the infrastructure strategy. Okay, go 61 to 65.
Yes, Mayor Chair. Just this is probably a comment for us as much as anything. I note the reference on page 64 to our collective purpose of empowering our people and place to thrive. I just think we need a bit of work on the language, because I don't think you can empower a place, certainly empower people. But all I'm flagging is that at some stage in the future, if we can kind of finesse that a bit, might be, just a thought. We can enable our people and place to thrive, but I don't think we can empower people. I don't think we can empower a place, logically. Anyway, that was all.
Need a workshop on that.
I think we do, definitely, yes, and a bit of whiz-bang chucked in.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, forward that one. Anything else up to page 65? Okay, go 66 to 70.
Yeah, again, sorry, Mayor Kircher. I think if you look under Prosperous District at the bottom of the last bullet point, communicate needs and potential trade-offs to agreed levels of service. And I think I know what it means, but I think it again needs to be reworded. Communicate needs and potential trade-offs to reach agreed levels of service, or to decide agreed levels of service, something like that. And under strong communities, it just says multi-use sports fields, second to last one. Everything else is further increase, upgrade, improve, strengthen. There's a reference to Oamaru Airport and Harbour upgrades. You could probably have upgrade Oamaru Airport and Harbour, but it just says multi-use sports fields, and I just think it should say something about them. I mean,
My apologies, Jim. I fixated the body of the rest of the document, but I missed it in that table.
yeah, sorry, I'm not being smart aleck or anything.
Thank you. It's all good. Councillor McRobbie.
67. That diagram on 67 is
Busy?
extremely so, in fact. And I do think we need a workshop on that to try and minimise the content. No, it is very busy, and I just wondered if it could somehow be simplified. It's got a lot of stuff on it, and it's got a lot of good stuff on it, but it's very busy. I don't know how you change that if you have to, but just my thoughts.
Yeah, I think graphically probably could be better.
Noted.
Okay, thank you. Good grace. Councillor Williams.
Just on page 70, those infrastructure provision. Dollar signs, you just got numbers there. I don't know, just some dollar signs. No, money.
On first one. Second
Page
one.
70.
Yeah.
or
On
whichever
all
one.
except for the dedicated staff, I imagine.
Yeah, try not to.
Just on page 69, on the third para, traditionally a rural and farming district, Waitaki's tourism market is growing rapidly. I think it might be more accurate at the moment to say has been growing rapidly. I'm just as a matter of fact, as of this moment.
Yeah, it's a bit hard
I
to
know.
know. I mean, anecdotally, we're doing very well at the moment.
Rapid tourism.
And, you know, there's evidence by a number of visits to some of the geosites over the weekend. It was, yeah, some very good numbers turning up to Elephant Rocks and Clay Cliffs and so forth. And, yeah, as Mr. Powers just said, yeah, evidence from Alps to Ocean, which is more than anecdotal. This fact is the big increase in riders on that.
Continues to grow.
Well, continue, yeah, look, I just, yeah, me is probably as right as I was, and maybe be right. Well, more correct. That's sorry, Mr. Right,
It's been minuted, but it was right.
right of centre. The mayor's right of centre.
Just got a comment from Mr. Power first.
Oh, just going back to page 67 and the complex graphic, just right up at the very top of the right, we've got Taonga, just needs to be spelled correctly. Taonga, obviously.
Good point. Councillor McRoby.
Page 69, a second paragraph, current district's population is currently estimated to be circa 23,500. I think it should be a comma, sorry to be picky.
Yeah.
Yeah, 23.5 is the population of Hariri.
Yeah, it's more like it.
Yes.
Thank you, Jim. I agree with you, Jim.
Thank you for the member of Hariri. Anything else up to where are we to page 70? We have page 71 through to 75.
Yes, Mayor Kurtz, just very quickly on page 73, at the very bottom under 3.2 strategy purpose. I think that's the first reference in the last line to WDC's AMPs. And I'm a bit like Ross with LAPP. I think that should be actually full out of asset management plans first of all, maybe, and then from then on bracket AMP. But I remember stumbling across it when I was reading this, and I thought AMP, and then I nutted it out.
Sorry, Jim, if I can draw your attention to the first sentence below table 3.1. Specific assets and activities within each folio described in more detail in the activities / asset management plans, AMP in brackets.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Forgive me. Yes, well spotted. Yeah.
Anything else to page 75? Page 76 to 80.
Sorry, Mayor Kurtz, yes, page 79. Just find it here from my, please, if you bear with me. Scrolling through. The last sentence on that page, similar pressures are present in the other infrastructure portfolios to ensure that the current day-to-day activity focus is paired with the necessary long-term focus. But again, I think I understand it, but I don't think similar pressures are present in the other infrastructure portfolio, meaning we have to ensure that the current day-to-day activity focus is paired with, or something like that. It just doesn't quite make sense as a sentence at the moment.
I think it does, but it's, I guess, are we assuming that people understand what the other infrastructure portfolios are, and should there be further explanation of those? Or another example given?
I'll reword that sentence so it makes more sense.
Ross?
Just again, Chair, on page 78, planned resilience response. You flick over the page and it has the decision hierarchy, but the word risk isn't anywhere in any of those. It perhaps could be mentioned WDC's approach to resilience decision follows a hierarchy or somewhere in there, including risk analysis or something like that. I just don't know whether that's appropriate. I just thought perhaps it should have some degree of commentary about risk. And I know risks mentioned elsewhere, but
Okay,
thought.
thank you. Councillor Williams.
Just on page 76, asset management system, under that heading, you've got a lot of talk about systems, plans and policies, and then you go straight into just calling the very last bullet point in AMP. I imagine it's probably an asset management policy on plan, but I just would like that specified, whether it's what AMP stands for, because it could be confused between an asset management policy versus just within the context of the rest of the paragraph.
Noted. Thank you. Okay, pages 81 to 85.
Yes, sir. Sorry, Mayor Chair. Page 84, I would just draw council's attention to immediately above 4.5 climate change. The paragraph immediately above that, last year's central government's free water reform process posed a specific resourcing challenge. Under proposed free water reform models, the water supply will become separate from WDC. If separated, directly impact. One, I'll just flag at the moment, that is in direct contradiction to something else referenced in the policy later. And I'll just ask you guys to file page 84 away when we come to a later page, which seems entirely to contradict that in terms of the strategy. And on page 85, this reference to carbon accounting and how we've started doing that, which surprised me, because I didn't know we had, and I would have thought somebody from an officer might have told us. And there's a reference also under 4.5.2 mitigation. In 2019, we commissioned a greenhouse gas inventory report to provide some base data. Has that ever been shown to councillors? Was it? Okay.
That's where, for council's total emissions, we reported that around 2,000
Oh, yes, okay. Yes, yes. Yep, no, that's fine.
versus emissions.
So when did we start doing the carbon accounting?
Since then, Mr. Hope.
No, we've been doing it for quite some time because we're designated a forest owner. We've had to count carbon credits.
Right.
Really, since the standards came in, so for quite some time.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, page 86 to 90.
Page 90, Chair, I think where it's got replacement values, it should be, I think that means millions, 122.1 replacement value should be millions. So that just needs a definition.
The all the values there needs clarification, otherwise we'll just write the check and get it all done now.
Yep,
Which would be really good.
$122.10 would be pretty clear. Thank you.
So I'm not sure if it's, I'm not sure whether it's thousands or no. Is it millions? Just millions. Yeah. Okay. So it's a truckload. Right. Anything else on those 5 pages? Okay. Moving on to page 91, pages 91 to 95.
Yes, Mayor Kircher. Bottom of page 95, this is where I would invite you to go back to page 84. I think we might lose water altogether. The bottom sentence on that page, WDC is developing a local centre of excellence for Three Waters planning and delivery and is locating internal consultant and contractor staff in a shared dedicated building. I know we had a shared dedicated building and we increased staff, but I wasn't aware that we'd signed off on a dedicated centre of excellence and so on. And one would question whether we should be doing that if it looks, as we say on page 84, that we might lose the whole lot anyway.
I suppose this is involves an element of proactivity in that if we are to lose it, we have the option still of retaining those well remunerated staff and their families within the district rather than losing them to another node. So it's not as if to say that that it's a certainty that they might be retained, but certainly there's an increased probability of it if we demonstrate that they are doing an excellent job.
Should we perhaps be a little more equivocal by taking district councillors considering developing or working towards developing a local centre of excellence? I'm just not sure that we've signed off on it, that's all. Look, I've made my point.
It's talked about, but also, you know, we've talked about the building that they're currently in being one that's temporary setup. So I was concerned by that comment. She dedicated building as being something that sounds like. Yeah. So I was concerned about that.
We can change the wording.
I like the idea overall, the concept, but yeah, it's just, it needs to fit with where council is at.
Yeah.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just on page 92, the three waters assets, the bar graphs there, and then they're just marked as WS, WW, and SW. I wonder if the people out in public will actually know what those abbreviations stand for. We do, but I couldn't see anywhere else where they were actually clarified.
That's right. No, we'll just ask for full explanations on those. Three words. Okay. Anything else up to there? Pages 96 to 100. Just a question I had. I just need to reread it on page 98. Just the key non-asset deliverables, climate change decision to be made. We must decide target carbon reductions, particularly for wastewater treatment, set funding levels. So, given that we have a credit already, is this something that we're still coming to us? Just about making efficiencies.
I think it's also about any new technology that's adopted, so particularly a water treatment plant, that will be a key consideration, I think, of all designed plants going forward. So I think it'll be something that will just be a consideration when a new treatment sort of regime is developed.
Yeah, I mean, for one example we've seen recently of reducing carbon emissions with contractors is the use of specially shaped buckets, for example, for digging trenches, rather than digging a square trench, digging a round trench, which means much less material being, much less bedding material being needed. Have we looked at anything like that? Are we having those discussions already with contractors?
Have to find that out.
There's just some good possibilities out there of ways where we actually save money and lower the carbon emissions. Councillor Percival.
Yeah, just on that same page, the private water suppliers decision, the explanation on that, why it's considered a safety concern when private water suppliers and suppliers are normally setting the criteria, meeting the criteria that's set anyway. So why would council look at extending them?
What it's saying is that it is an issue that council will need to grapple with. It's clearly indicated in the ROI legislation that there will be far greater levels of intervention into private schemes that aren't meeting the standards. whether it's through a district council authority or a water authority. They won't be, essentially they won't be allowed just to carry on not meeting the standards here.
One of the things that's come through as we've been dealing with 3 waters is that actually 800,000 people across New Zealand are not on council water schemes, and they're actually some of the most at risk just because they're not monitored and looked after in the same way as the council scheme is. The problem with the water services bill, which has just been going through the select committee, is that that bill says councils will need to pick up those ones if they fail. And the problem is that we no longer have 3 water services here. We don't actually got staff to do it, to look after. So there's a number of different parts to that. And, you know, we've certainly submitted that if there is a different entity looking after water, it's that entity should be tasked with looking after those small schemes. But yeah, we also don't like the idea of having to pick up quite costly upgrades for very small numbers of users. When actually, you know, we're trying to afford what we can for the existing users, not the existing schemes. So, yeah, it is a big decision to be made, and it depends on whether we're legislated into that role or whether we can actually choose to have. Lots more to come on that. Councillor Wallstein.
It's that same page, Mayor Kircher, the last thing, SCADA, SCADA. Can that perhaps just have a note underneath saying what's SCADA stands for? Yep.
Isn't it a European car company? The police have just bought their vehicles.
No, I think it's SCADA.
Oh, Skoda. Oh, Skoda, of course, yes.
It stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition.
Of course it does.
Whereas in the past, SCOTA stood for something quite different.
Chair,
Just to subscribe.
sorry, so Chair, just coming back to page 93, quick moment, those definitions. We talk about drinking water standards. Should, I know I missed the point earlier, should WS be DWS? Because it's not water standards, isn't it?
No, it's water services.
Oh, water services and
So
wastewater.
they'll be expanded out.
Okay, sorry, thanks.
Okay, page 100, I think. So pages 101 to 105. Give me Timdale.
I'm just under 105, the journeys. I wanted to sort of understand what that meant a bit more and how we actually calculate or know it.
Does anyone want to respond to that now?
So, no, just, oh, the journeys, oh, I see, yes, right.
I didn't actually, like, I'm guessing I kind of know what you mean by that. I don't know how we measure it or exactly what it is.
I'll have to take the question on note.
Are we expecting $30 million kilometres of journeys over the 10 years, is that? Yeah. Yes.
How do we measure that? Yeah, I just
I know.
wasn't sure. We'll get that back.
Councillor Williams.
101. Just a couple of things in that table. But first, are we the final eyes that are kind of proofreading this, or is there going to be, because there are a lot of issues with that I can totally see through, but I mean, I'm not a professional proofreader and don't want to sit down and do it. Is somebody else going to be sitting there and proofreading this whole document properly or not? Because there actually is a lot,
Okay.
a heap of a lot. And so as my on that table on page 101, in the heading you say roads and footpaths, blah, 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 and the final word is responses, yet you use 5 response instead of 5 responses. So it's just a whole lot of stuff like that, that sure, it's fine as it is, but it's not, it just comes across as a little bit like someone hasn't really put the effort into this document. Capital letters sometimes, and then another time you won't use one.
So
Things aren't lined up.
Can we just have an understanding what the process will be around proofreading?
Yeah, it was more about trying to get the content.
Yeah.
All of the content in first and then proofreading once all of that, because there's a quite circular is as good a description as any, because essentially we work on the financials and they need to flow back into this, and then we need to make sure that the explanations still match up to the financials. And so we sort of will focus on that and then do QA at the end of it.
Oh, okay. Just that it says
Yeah.
final draft at the start of it, so you start to go, well, okay,
I
right.
understand that.
Just on that page as well, and we've talked about the use of acronyms quite a bit. We've got HPMV, which is the High Performance Motor Vehicles, but maybe it's just a glossary or key at the end somewhere rather than adding to the size of the document, so people can actually find out what all these random terminology.
So that high productivity motor vehicles.
Did have a bit of a
Page one.
question on page 104. There's probably more of a bigger audit, really, but we're going through a whole lot of discussion on Three Waters and the lack of spending on infrastructure, and we're working on what's going to happen with the future of the Three Waters because of that. In roading, we're limited to what subsidy, well, we're in effect limited to what subsidy NZTA have available to give us. Otherwise, we're spending a lot of money on our roads, a lot more money, because we won't get subsidy for that. You could quite easily argue we're not keeping up with the work that's being done on that. Are we being set up to fail by the limitations of what the have on the funding that they have available for us? And is audit picked up on that we're not spending enough on roading, even though we're increasing every year, that we're not getting ahead of where we're at? You can take that as rhetorical if you wish.
I was going to take it that way.
I mean, it just does strike me as something that we're still not too bad, but for the huge amount of increase on use of road on our roads, the numbers of vehicles, the heavy nature of the vehicles, it's the reason why we spend more and more on roads, and we struggle to keep up still. And it would seem to be that even though we want to spend, we want to replace the Kapanui Bridge, for example. We get told by NZTA we can't do it. You've got to wait for 10 years. You've got to put up with closures during flood events and so forth for 10 years, and we would rather get on with it. So that is my rhetorical question, and I'll leave it at that.
And a very good rhetorical question.
Thank you very much.
Kakanui thanks you.
Right, so we can move on from that. So page 106 to 110.
Yes, Mr. Chair. On 106, under meeting demand, at the top of the page, our inability to meet HPMV demand and limited facilities for new tourist markets are challenges which will restrict growth. Well, when did we decide that we had an inability to meet it? It's a possible inability. It is possible that the demand will exceed our capacity to provide. But at what point have we decided that we are unable to meet HPMV demand? And personally, I would, a possible inability to meet and limited facilities for new tourism markets are challenges which may restrict. The sentence is far too explicit and categorical. It should be, right up.
It's been noted. See if we can make it right on that. Page 109, we're just talking about the first project there, walking and cycling projects. Enable cyclists to safely commute from the Penguin Colony and on the road. We've never really talked about where the end point should be at that southern end. To me, tourists attraction is not the right point. And I just wonder whether we actually have a bit more discussion in the future. It's fine, you know, we can leave it at that for the moment, but actually my thought would be somewhere up South Hill should be a starting point. And,
Okay.
with a side trip to Colin on the way to school, that's what you're doing. But we can have a discussion about that later. Councillor McRoby.
Page 106, under the heading safety, bottom of the page. I read this and I'm quite disappointed to read the survey of respondents way back in 15-16 and can't help but think when you read the next page, continual safety improvements to roading, speed, realignment, barriers, and the key strategic focus delivering safety improvements and managing speeds. Now that to me is a load of codswallop if you look at what Wakakatari have been not doing in some parts of our district. I'm not speaking any particular part, I'm just saying they've got no money to spend to help us on issues like that. They don't appear to have any inclination to want to help us, and they're fixed by what their views are on Auckland and north of there. So I would like to see some improvements so that when we do our next survey of respondents, we get a much, much better degree of customer satisfaction and better than 50% saying that our roads are not safe, you know, lower than that, I should say. So disappointing to read that comment, you know, 5 or 6 years later.
Yeah.
Just make the point that it's disappointing to read that.
I guess it's difficult when you're also talking about 1,800 kilometres of roads, and you know they may have one spot that they think isn't safe, which in itself can be subjective. But I do know our team spends money every year on safety improvements. And there is some funding available. Is it enough? I think we know that. You think so? Yeah. Okay, pages 111 to 115.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Page 112, 5.4 recreation of solid waste. In the yellow boxes, you've got increasing community expectation, demographic change, national focus on waste and minimisation. And we are saying service provision lagging behind New Zealand's increased awareness of waste and recycling. I don't believe that's true. The most recent survey we've done of people showed that recycling here is actually at a higher level than it is in Timaru, where they have a 3-bin street curbside collection. And we've got we fund Palmerston, we fund Hamden, we've got the drop-offs up the valley. We give a lot of money to Chelmer Street, which is a very successful and actually more successful than most local authority recycling programs at the moment, because they don't mix in the bin, which contaminates and drastically reduces value. I think it's wrong to say our service provision is lagging. I don't. I really don't. It could be service provision, issues with service provision evolving to meet New Zealand's increased awareness of waste. I mean, something like that makes some sense, but I don't believe a statement of current circumstance. It is factual.
I suspect staff have taken on board comments that have been made in various media and so on. That people come here, they expect curbside collection, recycling, and green waste and so on, and we don't have that as a council service. It is available as a by the private sector, but that's a shift where people from elsewhere have come from. So I think that there is reason for that point being made. I can argue just how significant that is, but I don't think it's not true.
No, I do.
I think there is truth to it.
There may be a truth, but it may be a false truth, or the truth may be based on an assumption that a council-funded curbside collection, which in places like Christchurch is now catastrophically failing because people are putting so much non-recyclable material in their recycling bins that the city's dumping virtually everything it does.
Right. moving on from that, I think it's noted, but I'm not
Okay.
sure there's much to do. I did have a sort of a higher level question, and that is, I understand these two elements are a part of one area of activity of council, but it seems to be stretching things to put recreation with solid waste and try and have them as, you know, in one activity plan. And yeah, I mean, it might just have to be the way it is for the time being, but I think they are quite distinctly different in most people's minds, and maybe you should separate it out in the future.
Nick, just something else on page 115.
Yes.
Under, at the very top of the page, under natural and conservation park, the second paragraph talks about a total of 22 playgrounds and 4 skate parks. The second sentence in that paragraph reads, this equates to 5.8 playgrounds per 1,000 children under 15, which is slightly above the national median of 3.9 playgrounds per 1,000 children. Well, in fact, it's not slightly above, it's actually above. In fact, you could argue significantly above. Nearly half, nearly double, not quite. It's, you know, 4 and 6 if you round them off. So that's not slightly, that's quite a lot.
About 49%.
Yeah, so you take out, what I'm saying is remove the word slightly.
I think that would be justified.
Noted.
Okay, pages 116 to 120.
Yeah, sorry, Mick, it's page 117. Key deliverables and indicative cost funding. When have these budgets been signed off? Total parks, correct operation and maintenance expense, 3,273,000 annually, with total indirect costs 1,485,000 annually. When did we sign those off? Are they in the L2P? Are they? We're spending.
We wouldn't be discussing this today with respect if it wasn't in the LTP,
Well,
surely.
Sorry, when did we actually see that number? Did you know we were spending more than $3 million a year on?
Well, if you go back about 2 meetings ago, you might find it.
I'm not
I think
Right, yeah.
1 meeting ago.
Mr. Hope, I'll just get you to respond directly to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of goes back to the point I made earlier. There's part of this is iterating data. That is the total that's being proposed in every area that's covered by recreation. Is a significant amount. And, you know, that's why the parks contract was a very significant contract that council reviewed, had been put into, when it went out to the market.
So if it's not indicative, then it's actual. Is that right?
It's the indicative for the next year. And these are still all drafts and subject to consultation.
Page 105, just a note about campgrounds, 11 campgrounds. 4 of these campgrounds are leased to commercial entities, another is about to be leased, and 1 is to be returned to Crown Management. Which is all news to me.
You know, to find that one out.
I was just looking for that. Look, on page 24, we've got the showing where your $10 a rate is spent in recreation services is $1.39, which, given we collect over 30 million rates, that's over 3.5 to 4 million. So it is a very appreciable number. So we're seeing it in different forms here. Seeing the real hard number is, yeah, it's a bit of a surprise, but actually it's the reality of what we're doing.
Well, I'm glad you said it's a bit of a surprise anyway. I feel a little bit validated.
Right. Now that I've gone back there, I don't know what page. Okay, anything else up to page 120? Go 121 to 125. Okay, 126 to 130. Just on page 127, might be for Mr. Hope, or Mr. Rendell, Oamaru Harbour, breakwater maintenance, dredging, stuff upgrade, 1.1 million plus inflation for a 10-year period. So it just does not seem to be anywhere near what was being spent on the breakwater.
Spending 200,000 every second year.
Can you check on that one? 'Cause
Yeah,
I don't think it's
well, I
right.
don't think there's a dredging exercise included in 10 years. So it's just that increased allocation of funding for the breakwaters post. I will check on it.
Well, I think there should be a dredging. Yeah, should be some dredging actually in the scheduled in there at some stage, because it's, I think you can rely on probably 5 years, but rely on anything more. Also,
Sure, let's double check.
Okay, anything else up to page 130?
So just a question again, 1.6 mil at the airport, plus inflation. Again, have we has that been itemised at all? And have we seen an itemised budget for that?
Biggest two items, a lighting upgrade and which certainly been discussed.
Yes.
It's required a seal.
That's
And the
right.
other is a reseal of the runway.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thank you.
Councillor McRobbie?
Same page, Paul, 127, WDCHQ building developments. That is one that I just can't quite recall what that's for.
Still,
Ah, right, yes, okay, thanks. Yep. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Tamadale?
I'm not sure if I'm ahead of us here or not, page 129.
No, you're right.
Right. Just around the demographic changes. I agree that the district will experience changes associated, but not just with an aging population. I think a demographic, those changes will also be around cultural changes as well, which does have an effect on our planning moving forward.
there's certainly a bit of just slight disconnect comment in there. Some of the other places in the world that change is recognised that it will services and facilities.
I think the other assumption we can reasonably make is that we will continue to have a lot of properties being built that aren't permanent residences, that are holiday homes. I think that number could be quite appreciable if you look at the way some of our holiday type destinations are developing. So I think that certainly needs to be an assumption. I think as we go through the district plan review, to expand the areas of residential development potential.
This is, I don't disagree with the point, but I think, on 129, it's specifically about council's property assets, not sort of the demand from the community on those assets, rather than the changing nature of I suppose, the property mix that we do.
Yeah, it's just that it'll increase the peak capacity requirements. We see places like Councillor Wallstein.
Yeah, page 130, that graph, capital expenditure 5.7. Just where it's broken down, it looks like we're spending a lot of money on capital on roads. I just wonder how that capital is, how it's defined, because we're not building new roads, we're not tar sealing gravel roads, so.
The major item there will be the replacement of catering.
But there is, every year though, Josh, there's quite a large amount of capital expenditure. So what is capital in your definition on our roads?
So any renewal works of roads, footpaths, bridges, covering.
So it also captures the maintenance program, reskilling, anything like that. So anything that extends an asset's life.
Oh, okay, so the maintenance program, oh, that's the.
It's captured under the capital program. Steve.
Oh, okay, to me, that's repairs and maintenance side. Okay, yeah, understand, thank you.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, coming back to page 139, looking across at that chart, by the way, table
What
X,
page?
page 139. I'm
We're
assuming,
not up to the,
yeah, well, wasn't that the one that Councillor Tavendale mentioned earlier? 139?
It was 129.
Sorry, I'll jump down, I'll wait.
right. Page 131 to 135. Councillor Williams?
Just some clarification on page 132. Sewage forecasts. Now, are we actually forecasting sewage or are we forecasting projects? I don't know. Just a wee bit more clarification in the heading there.
Yes.
Something.
Well, Oamaru does have fibre now. Could be happening. Okay, anything else up to page 135? Go 136 to 140.
Yes, Miku, just looking at page 139, talking about demographics, which Councillor Tavendale did earlier, that table needs to have a number because it's, you obviously haven't given it one yet. But looking at risks, you know, you've identified the risk of the mix of ages and ethnicities being significantly different. You've identified that as insignificant. And you've identified the risk below the population may change at rates different to that projected. And again, I would have thought those are significant risks, not insignificant risks. I don't know quite why you've ranked them as insignificant. I mean, I would have
Okay,
thought.
so can we just have a response to that?
Probably the main reason is that because of our low population, the numbers we're talking about would probably be insignificant. Conversely, if
Sorry. The insignificant is that the difference, you read the piece below insignificant.
Yes.
It says that the mix of age within the population is significantly different than the forecast. So that's the insignificant risk.
So we're not likely to be too far out.
I see. Gotcha. Okay, right. All right. I got people understand it that way.
Okay, anything else? Page 140, 141 to 145.
Yes, Miku, 145, sorry, 141. Again, over the life of this LTP, council anticipates capital, we're looking at water supplies, third bullet point down. Water supply schemes 96 million, sewage schemes 40, stormwater and drainage 20. Just a question, we have signed those off.
We haven't signed them off as projects, but they are in the forecasts, which were detailed earlier. Infrastructure strategy.
So we're happy to have 156 million there at the moment in the LTP.
That's the numbers our staff are telling us, and hopefully by the time we get to those points, we've found other more cost-effective solutions, or certainly some other funding would be really handy. But yeah, this is facing the reality of the infrastructure that's going to be needed. Not that our population is necessarily growing that much, but just the fact that the standards are going to be much higher, particularly around wastewater, to what we currently do in some of our areas. I think some places are fine. Oamaru is going to need a reasonably upgraded sewage plant for capacity, but there's other areas where more treatment is needed to meet the increasing standards. And we've still got a number of water schemes that need upgrades as well. So there'll be more. I think that the number is the number, and if that's what's in the forecast overall, then get it lower in the next iteration of the plan.
Well, it's just that it means we're spending more than 15 million per year each year. And I just don't remember seeing budgets that showed us what projects would be allocated, the sums of money that amounts to.
If you go through the strategy, it's all detailed in the strategy.
Okay.
Okay, anything else up to page 145? Page 146 to 150.
Sorry, yes, Mr. Richard, last one from me, page 148. At the top of the page, there's a reference to significant coastal inundation hazard limited to Kakanui. Well, given that, I think on the previous page, it says that the projected sea level rise is between half a metre and 0.900 centimetres up to 2090. That's not going to inundate Kakanui, which is on a promontory. It's just wrong. Kakanui is not going to be inundated. A lot of places inundated before then, and if I recall the NEMA report, it said there were going to be more frequent storm events in the inner harbour here, and that was a principal risk.
Mr. Sewell.
We do have a report which shows that parts of Kakanui will be inundated. It's all mapped out. We had that done a couple of years ago. So.
Around the river, the
On the
low
north
lying
side.
areas.
Colston Road, something around there.
Right. Significant.
It is for that part of Kakanui.
You have seen that report.
Yeah.
Okay, I've just got something on page 150. Just on CCO income, third box down. It says moderate and it refers to CCOs may deliver. Due to we only hear one CCO pays a dividend. It'd be clearer just to say that Whitestone. Put the acid on that. On those, on that board. The other is the LGFA. I don't think we joined the LGFA in response to the impacts of COVID-19. I think the intention was that we would join that anyway. It's just the nature of our cash flows, more to the point. So just ask you to note that. Anyone else at page 150? Or add 151 in there. Six last page. Okay. Right. Done. Anything else you want to raise? We'll go back to the recommendations. Someone like to move recommendations as they are.
Page please.
Page 6.
So moved. Page 6. Councillor Wallstein moved that. Someone's like second. Timdale, thank you. Any discussion on them? Okay, lots of amendments, obviously. So thank you very much for all the effort. Those in favour to resolve those, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, it's carried. Thank you very much, and just thank you very much to Mike and Margaret for your great work on this. Josh and 14 as well. Thank you for that. And Mr. Hope for masterminding the whole situation. So well done to you. But thank you very much. It's been a long process. Still got a wee bit more to go, and hopefully get the consultation documents adopted in the next couple of weeks. A week.
Thank you.
2 weeks. Yeah. So thank you very much. With that, I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you.